Welcome to RIA Match's webinar, Why Some Mergers Fail and Others Succeed. I'm Mary Ann Buchanan, founder and CEO of RIA Match. Thank you for joining us today. Mergers and acquisitions are of heightened interest to our advisor communities as we strive for successful succession plans and inorganic growth. While much focus is placed on firm valuation, you may be surprised to know that partnership dynamics is a key component to M&A success that is often unaddressed. Dysfunctional partnership dynamics will erode the business you have spent decades building. We want you to be part of the discussion today. Thank you very much for coming. Let me cover some quick housekeeping rules for the group, and this is a really good thing to do, so let's do an audio check. Can you raise your hand if you can hear me? Do you see where you can raise your hand in the panel on the right? Let's see if we can have some hands going up. Oh, wonderful. People can hear me now. Lou, very good. Mark, Joel, James, thank you. Felix, Greg, wonderful. That's great. That just makes sure we're all working well. Your line should be muted automatically with a webinar. We want to let you know that the webinar is being recorded and it will be up on the site on the webinar page on RIA Match by tomorrow. We are aware of a number of people who are unable to join us today. Be sure and let your colleagues know the session is recorded and they can listen to it at their convenience. I want to let you know how you ask questions. You'll see the question box in the panel on the right. A good thing to do is just to type the question when you think of it. We'll come and we'll answer the questions at the end, but that way you won't forget it when it comes to mind. Any questions that we don't get answered, we'll include in the Ask the Panel section of the website. We will also include the questions that are asked. So please keep your questions general, anonymous, and high level. So let's go ahead and test our question box. Everyone type into the question box the city you are calling from. Let's see how that works. Okay, so we got Tampa. All right, very good. Louisville, San Diego, Milwaukee, Charlotte, Mount Laurel, wonderful. Salem, New Hampshire, cool. That's great. Vero Beach, Florida, wonderful. Thank you. So we'll be conducting polling during the webinar, and we will share the results with you as we go along. So that should be insightful as well. Okay, so we're done with housekeeping. Again, thank you very much for coming. And we know that we trust that you will gain valuable information. We hope you enjoy the webinar. So very briefly, let me tell you a little bit about RIA Match. RIA Match is a website that offers financial advisors solutions for succession planning, growth, and the next generation of financial advisors. We affectionately call NextGen. The webinar matches advisors, future advisors, and firms with other advisors and RIAs who want to buy, sell, merge, join a firm, or add advisors to their practice. The advisors and RIAs can search for free and pay to connect anonymously and securely on our site. RIA Match is independently owned, and our mission is to create an efficient market for advisors and RIAs to partner their practice. The site is agnostic as to custodial platform or whether a deal gets done. We've created the playing field. We're not calling the plays. It's designed to serve all advisors, regardless of scale, scope, or experience. Success on RIA Match is making connections that will lead to potential partnerships or new firms to join. Our goal is to bring advisors the most efficient tools and excellent information so that you can make the best decisions for the success and growth of your firm. RIA Match has over 1,500 registered subscribers from 45 states, and they have sent over 11,000 communications between them. So let's get started. What I'd like to do is welcome back our negotiation experts. Lizette Smith and Tanya Rapaz are co-founders of the Partnership Resource Group. Lizette and Tanya were formerly partners in a wealth management firm that merged. Then they subsequently sold their interests. They've studied conflict resolution and negotiation at the Program on Negotiation at Harvard Law School and UMass Boston's Conflict Studies Graduate Program. They launched the Partnership Resource in 2012 to focus on conflict resolution for business partners many of whom are investment advisors. They've completed a research study and incorporated their findings into a white paper called Best Practices in Investment Advisory Partnerships. And they'll share their insights with us today, and I'll be moderating. What I want to do is let you know who's on the webinar with us today. So what types of firms are participating? So you can see there 16% are early solo practitioners, 17% mature solos, 25% are early ensemble practices, 22% mature ensembles, 20% market dominators. Among the advisory firms attending today, 29% of you have completed a merger. Oops, sorry, go on to that. So 29% of you have completed a merger, and 10% of you have broken up. The next question in our registration was, would you consider a merger? 91% of you answered yes. You would consider a merger. And it's wise to be open to mergers. This is we have a shortage of sellers, as you may have noticed. So let's begin our panel discussion. Lizette, why do some mergers fail and others succeed?
That's an excellent question, and really that's what we set out to discover with our paper. We'd all seen the data and in our own experience learned how much more profitable ensemble firms can be than solo practitioners, but we also knew from our mediation practice and from our own experience that there are a lot of failures when it comes to people trying to merge, and that those people aren't counted in that data. And so we wanted to really see what set successful partnerships apart. And so, that's kind of what we want to show you here today.
Okay, great. Should we launch our first polling question?
Yeah, I think that would be a good start.
Are you ready? Is that a good thing? Okay, guys, get ready. Here comes your first question. What percentage, well, I'll let it load first. What percentage of mergers fail? Is it 40%, 50%, 60%, or 70%? And we'll give you a minute or so, or maybe not even a minute, don't need that, to go ahead and click off an answer. We've got 66% of you have voted. 69 get into the 70s. Yes, wonderful, wonderful, 72%. And we'll give it a few more seconds to run here. All right, very good, very good. Okay, I'm going to close the poll in a few seconds here. All right, here we go. And now what I'll do is I'll also share the results with you. The poll is closed. And here are your answers. So 40% of you said that 15% said 40% of mergers failed. 33% said 50% of the mergers failed. 19% said 60%, and 33% said 70%. So, Tanya, what's the correct answer for these research findings?
Are you ready? It's 70%. In the wider world of business, 70% of mergers fail. And there's not much reason to believe that it's any different for RIAs.
Well, if so many fail, is it worth it to form an ensemble or a partnership, Tanya?
We think so. I mean, there's so many benefits to being in a partnership, and as probably everyone who is listening knows, in 2011, Moss Adams reported that the pre-partner pre-tax income for a partner in a mature ensemble practice was 2 times that of a mature solo. So that, just on profitability alone, there's a lot of reason to do that. But there's so many benefits. The business continuity aspect is important to clients and regulators. You get leverage, you get scale, you can attract broader services and attract better staff, in addition to that profitability. And then no less important, but a little bit less tangible, is the experience of being able to share your successes and failures. It's really enjoyable to have a peer or a colleague who could be a sounding board, someone who will test your ideas or improve your ideas. We have seen partnership work really well. So we wanted to know how people were able to maintain it through the ups and downs of business.
Very good. Lizette, what was the basis of the research project into successful partnerships?
So it was really a combination of our own experience as partners and then merging to form a larger partnership. And then we transitioned our practice, and how we, looking at that, thought it could have gone better. And also working with partners in mediation who are at some inflection point. But really wanting to be more proactive, kind of seeing the same issues come up with partners who are at a breaking point, and wanting to help people more early on to avoid getting derailed and to really be able to make the most out of being a partnership. So one of the things we realized is there's remarkably little research about the business-partner relationship. It's a very important relationship, as those who have been in it recognize, but when you look at social science research, part of what we did was try to apply what's out there for social science research in groups and other things to the partner relationship. So we kind of took those and then interviewed, we ended up interviewing 40 successful partnerships, and some of them also had stories of less successful ventures that they had been on, but that really gave us a wealth of information to try to dig deeper into some similarities.
Yeah, very good, very good. Tanya, who were the participants in your research from a demographic point of view?
Okay, there's a slide for that.
All right, there we go. Coming
So
up.
if you're curious, I mean, we really were able to talk to a wide range of firms. 38% of the partners we spoke to came from market dominator firms, people with assets under management of greater than $1 billion. But we also talked to just as many, fewer people in the mid-market and then the smaller firms. 40 over on the years in partnership, we were very fortunate in that a lot of very successful partnerships that had been in business, as you can see, 45% of the respondents had been in business for 15 years or more. Some is in business for as many as 30 years. Then 34% had been in business for 5 to 15 years. And we also talked to partners who were in business for 1 to 5 years. So they don't have the track record, but they did have a lot of great ideas of how they were continually refining and maintaining that partnership. In terms of number of partners, most of the partnerships were of 2 partners, although some of those included partnerships that started out with a different number of partners. 30% had 3 to 5 partners, and 14% were that larger firm with 6 partners or more. Some of them had as many partners as 40. And then of the respondents, 68% were men.
Very good. Now, Tanya, we're getting a little bit of feedback that the attendees are having a hard time hearing you, so I don't know if you can adjust your mic a little bit. We were trying to get that straight just prior, so our apologies for that.
How do I sound now?
Better. Let's keep going with it. But I just wanted our attendees to know I'm getting the feedback. Thank you. And any other questions, always just keep sending them our way. So, Tanya, what do we hope to accomplish today on the webinar? What do you guys want to cover?
Well, first, we want to share what we've learned, what sets the successful partnerships apart. And from that, we were able to pull together some best practices. 10 tips kind of rose to the top. So we want to talk about how we can integrate those practices into the regular due diligence you would do before entering a partnership or starting a merger to have the strongest partnership possible. And we hope participants can take this advice so they can maximize all the benefits of being in a partnership we talked about before, but reduce the risks and the cost of failure, which can be quite severe. The cost of unwinding a partnership, of losing clients, of maybe damaging reputations, it can be quite large.
After decades of building a practice, you bet it can.
Yeah.
Lizette, were you able to identify some common themes within the successful partnerships?
Yes, actually, I think kind of on our way to trying to come up with best practices, we looked first and found some broader themes, kind of key attributes that successful partnerships had in common. And the way we grouped them was their view of commitment, that they have a real awareness of being better together than apart, that they have very well aligned kind of individual and group goals, and they're able to kind of build and maintain that. So commitment is a really important part of that. We also saw how they looked at compatibility. We tried to really drill down on how successful partners, what that meant to them, not only in terms of compatible skills, but also how they looked at different traits. And we ended up breaking that down in the paper, looking at how trust comes into play, how they define themselves as far as their associations, and something that called optimal distinctiveness that we'll talk about a little more later. And of course, you know, we really wanted to look at how partners communicate, knowing that that would be a really important piece, and how they are able to have really strong and robust discussions without, and have it be beneficial in how they look at their decision-making process. When it came to the last piece, we kind of pulled together you know, a lot of people look at partners as having a shared vision of their firm, and what we ended up seeing was that what is more important is that they have a shared vision of their partnership, basically how they collaborate, what they each bring to the partnership, and having a shared view of that, respecting not only what their value is to the partnership, but what the other people are bringing too. So those four kind of broad themes are things that we were able to differentiate among the successful partnerships.
Very good. These seem to be what might be considered the softer elements of a partnership, you know, sort of not valuation, ownership, operating agreement, or other terms. Aren't those issues as important as well, Tanya?
Oh, yes, Marianne, that's an excellent question. Excuse me. Negotiating those more technical and concrete aspects of a partner are very important. But we are finding that the cultural issues are being more universally recognized as the driver of success or failure, and we wanted to see how successful partnerships manage this.
What was the difference?
Well, one thing we noted was that partners who had been through a breakup of a partnership or a merger that did not stick are very happy to spend time and resources on maintaining the relationship aspect of their partnership, and are very receptive to this notion of defining and maintaining a culture for their partnership.
Right, and that it takes effort.
Right, and time and effort, exactly.
Yeah. What was one of the most surprising findings from your study?
There were a few. I think one of the things that surprised us was how consistently successful partnerships used formal behavioral and motivation assessments. We were surprised at how early some of them use them in the process of getting to know new prospective merger partners. And I think, as Tanya said, people who have tried and failed or spent a lot of time and energy going down a path that didn't work out are more willing to do this. And then another thing that was surprising was that having a previous association, either in a study group or some kind of professional network, really wasn't a predictor of success in getting together. And we have some theories about why that's true, but I think people kind of normally gravitate to people that they are acquainted with, but there are some issues with that we'll talk about a little more later, why that may not be a secret to success.
Interesting, interesting. So, Tanya, how can partners implement a strong partnership?
So Lisette described the qualities that these successful partnerships all shared, and from our interviews we pulled out what things that they were actually doing, and so that led us to our 10 best practices, our 10 tips to create an exceptional partnership, and the first 5 are listed here.
Okay. Did you learn anything about the right and the wrong reasons to go into a merger?
Right. That is number 2. A merger is a long-term solution. Do not use it to solve a short-term problem. And we did talk to some people who had done that. It can seem appealing to go into a partnership or merger to get more revenue, to enter a new market. We even talked to one participant who really needed a new lease, so kind of proceeded hastily into a partnership. But having a merger fail or break up a partnership is just too expensive, as we already discussed.
Right.
You can't take shortcuts. And while you're going through the process, I mean, many people go through a lot of conversations before they decide to merge. But in the excitement of the merger, they might be glossing over the red flags or kind of leaving the harder stuff to later. And we have another story of one failed partnership that decided to merge in phases, which sounds reasonable, but they decided to merge with all the easy stuff in one step and then lead the hard stuff to a second step that they would do later once they were done with the first step. And when they got to the harder stuff, they found that they couldn't come to agreement on many key issues that were just central to the business, so they had to unwind it. And when partnerships unwind, it's never easy to get out. I mean, no one wants to explain to the clients why the name keeps changing and why they need to keep signing new agreements. And one participant told us that when his partnership did not work out, he felt he really had to work hard to regain the sense in his clients and his staff that he was a good decision maker.
Right. The repercussions are, roll right through the whole thing from staff to clients.
Yeah, right.
And one of the things I know, Tanya, you said in the past was that you have to understand what you can live with and what you can give up.
Right. Yeah, that's probably the most important. That's our number one tip, is to fully assess your goals and motivation, and really look at why are you considering this merger. What are you hoping to get out of it? What do you have to offer? And you should do this in writing and kind of keep this as even a personal checklist, so that every opportunity that you come across, you're comparing to what your actual goals and objectives are. You know, what can you live with? This is especially true if you are a solo practitioner now. Having to agree before making decisions about things that you have always been making yourself might be a completely new experience for you. So you need to go through what really needs to be lined up and have awareness of what you're bringing to the partnership, and then look at it from your counterparts' point of view. What are they bringing to the partnership?
Right. Lizette, why is it so important to work together first? And talk to me about this number 3, working together. What do you mean by that?
Well, one of the things we found, and I guess this is kind of a corollary to the fact that having an association or a casual relationship is not necessarily helpful, but working together does give people really a unique view of being able to see people in a variety of situations and seeing them, you know, their strengths and weaknesses, and especially how they talk to clients and how they treat staff. We did talk to some people who had been in partnerships that that ended up failing, where they were they thought they knew someone and were very surprised to see how they treated their staff, and kind of set up for some unpleasant surprises. So working together, you know, we also spoke to people who had had a history of working with their partner and really felt like the transition into being partners after that was more seamless. Of course, that would really narrow your the scope of who you had to choose from to become a partner. So since that's not always possible, one of the things we're trying to do is look at how to kind of simulate working together through role plays and case studies, and ways that people can see how people approach and prioritize different problems so that they could work together better in the future. It's something more that's a little deeper than just having conversations about how you would work, but to work on a case or a project together seems to, you know, set the stage for working together successfully in the future, kind of priming. You'll have some small successes that you can look back on to see how you did work together in the past.
I think that's a very good idea. It's sort of like dating, as opposed to just jumping right into the merger. You really have to spend some time together.
Right, or even, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or what I want to do, if we're ready, is to go ahead and launch our next poll. All right, are you ready? So here we go. It's coming up. What do people most value in their partnership, according to the Partnership Resource White Paper? So we'll get the answer from them, but let's jump in here and weigh in. Is it a sounding board that people value most, or complementary skills, or that an ensemble practice attracts more and better clients, or certainly the business continuity? I mean, we get that all of the time, that we need business continuity, and so that's obviously an important feature as well. So We have slightly over half of our audience has voted, so we'll leave it in there a little bit longer. Very good. Okay. We'll close it down here shortly. All right. Very good. We'll go ahead and close the poll now. 67% of you voted. Thank you very much. Okay, let's see what our answers are. So, what do people value most? 18% said sounding board, 27% complementary skills, 23% said the ensemble practice attracts more and better clients, and 32% business continuity. Lizette, what did your research show, and what are your thoughts on the polling answer?
Well, I think, all of those issues are an important part of partnership. We actually had two components to our research. We had a survey, and then we did the in-depth interviews. And in our survey, finding complementary skills was the thing that people valued most, and it wasn't by a lot, but it was something that people, that partners really seemed to be seeking and then value when they had it, when they found that. And what we wanted to, that wasn't entirely surprising to us, since it's kind of a complicated field, and sometimes people feel like, they can't do everything, and it would be great to have expertise in different areas. What we drilled down on when we did our interviews, though, was the idea of not just complementary skills, but complementary traits. A lot of people kind of start by describing that their partner is very different from them, but what they mean, and sometimes they mean, oh, they're the investment person and I'm the technology person. But what we saw in more long-term and exceptional partnerships are people that recognize differences that are a little more subtle, and this also may come into play why the assessments become important, is because they talk about things like my partner, I'm always very optimistic, I'm a little bit pie in the sky, I really appreciate that my partner is more realistic and is more practical in trying to implement the things that I might talk about in very big picture terms, and then they can be more detail oriented. Or, I really like to read up about theories of stuff, but they can find out what we literally need to do to implement that. So there's a lot of those kind of descriptions that aren't exactly complementary skills, but they are traits that we see in successful partnerships, especially when they recognize them. When they, a lot of people start off saying, we're very different, it's hard to really say, but after time, and especially those who have used formal assessments, kind of have that touch point to go back to know why it works. And, at least in our minds, this may really help them to grow their commitment, why they recognize that they're better together than apart.
And so it's actually the awareness, and not only having them, the complementary traits, but having the awareness that that's what it is that makes it work.
Yeah, exactly. I think that really helps.
And valuing what the other person brings to it also.
Right,
exactly.
So let's look at this.
Yeah, I wanted to just show you quickly an example for those who, we talk about assessments in the top 10, in our top 10 list, and, there are a variety of formal assessments that people use. DISC is one that people use, Myers-Briggs to a different extent. There's a Colby. We use something called Talent Analytics, and this is output from this. And what we find really valuable is to see, we've only shown 2 partners here, you can do it for more than that, but really to see along a spectrum how you and your partner relate. So we feel like the overlay of this, it's been valuable to the people we've worked with and even to each other. Tanya and I went through this process too, to just, and it's not perfect, there are some things that you may really disagree with, but they have about an 85% success rate, or
predictability.
Yeah, predictability, exactly. So what's valuable to see, though, is, are there gaps? Are there things where you're going to not be able to communicate that well because you're so different. You know, in this case, these people are, there's no area where they're kind of diametrically opposed, but there are areas where they have to be aware how other people are viewing things, or it will be a lot easier if they see how other people are, how their partner is viewing things versus how they might be viewing them. And it can really save a lot of misunderstanding and kind of wrong assumptions, people going in with maybe the wrong assumptions about what's motivating how someone's acting. If they know a little bit more about what their approach is, that can really help.
Right. Very good. And what about this and the ambitions?
Yeah, what I wanted to point out here is these are are more, again, kind of broad issues that people, or broad descriptions of how people act and what drives them. And what's important is that people, not that they're perfectly aligned, but that they may be aligned on some things and diverge on others, but not be totally divergent. And one of the issues that we talk about in the paper is this idea of optimal distinctiveness, which basically means what they found in other situations is that people really thrive in groups where they feel like they're part of the group, but they have something unique and valuable that they bring. And it's that kind of relationship that seems to make really strong partnerships. So in other words, you're together enough that you can understand each other and you can bond, but there are areas where you can add distinct value. And seeing something like this, where you see areas where you're together and where you're a little bit apart, can kind of help to define that and bond over it.
As an example, as we look at the sample assessment output with Jamie and Terry on here, give me an example of where they're quite far apart, and then an example of where they're aligned, just so that I can further understand this slide.
Sure. So in this case, on the theoretical area, both Jamie and Terry rated that as kind of their second driver. So they're really together on that. They both really like to, one way to see this is they have a lot of intellectual curiosity. They really like to research things. So they can kind of appreciate that in each other. They don't make a lot of snap decisions. So
like planners.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. They are planners. One of the and so that's something that kind of can keep them together and help them understand each other. So if one of them, if they were further apart on this, and one of them, you know, didn't do a lot of research but kind of went a lot with their gut, it would be harder for the other person to value that, or they might have to, you know, they would have to come to some decision about that. Like, look, I know you like to research the death out of something, but sometimes let's just, you know, go with it.
Make a decision. What about this individualistic? They're obviously way apart there. What is that? How would I interpret that?
On individualistic, yeah, I think actually this was an area that for this group of partners, the person who came out as highly individualistic didn't feel like that did define them so much. So basically it's the extent to which you want to, you know, you don't want to conform. You want what you do to be really singular and really stand out from the crowd. And the person who rated that low when we described it and debriefed about it didn't feel like that wasn't important. They just had put other things ahead of it. So even though they were opposed in that area, it was a really interesting conversation because they could kind of see why they came out that way, but also how they would be able to work together on that.
So it's not a deal breaker, but a point of discussion.
Right, and actually, and in this case, you know, on the altruistic spectrum, they were a little bit far apart. We like them to be close. It's kind of within 3. So on altruistic, they're a little farther apart. But in that case, it was kind of something that they thought worked well for them, that they, you know, one might always want to, cut fees and do a lot of pro bono work, and they were glad that they had someone to balance that and vice versa. So, you know, again, it's a matter of kind of naming it so that when you run into those issues, you can say, look, I know that you've never met a nonprofit that you didn't like, but this is what we're going to do. And it's a lot easier to have those conversations.
And good to have a vocabulary up here. So how do you rank on this vocabulary? Because I think in a normal conversation you wouldn't think, this is why these assessments can have value, is you wouldn't think, right, I'm very individualistic, or this is how I present, and let's have a moment to discuss that.
Yeah, it's a really different way of defining things than especially people in the investment advisory field are used to. They get theoretical and relationships, but there are different components that you can drill down on that really help you define that in a more granular fashion that can really help.
Right, very good. So Tanya, number 5 here, communication. It's obviously important to any relationship. Did you learn any surprising tips doing the research?
Yes, I think we came away with some really good takeaways on that. I mean, as you just said, communication is so vital to every relationship we have, and great partners don't leave it to chance. They don't hesitate to schedule meetings and will have unscheduled communications as needed. When we talked to partners who had a failure, looking back, they almost always pointed to some breakdown in communication, that when they were aggravated or annoyed with their partner, they avoided them. Or when there was a problem with a client, they didn't bring it up right away. So it was that kind of avoidance of communication that ultimately led to the partnership failure. So keeping that communication open is something that the great partnerships made a priority, whether that meant a scheduled meeting or going off-site. One tip that we came away with that I think a lot of people could benefit from is having an open agenda meeting where you come to the meeting not planning to discuss anything specifically, but then have the participants brainstorm what is important now, decide what you're going to discuss, and table the rest for later. Some of the people that we spoke to have been doing that, and it's a really good way to spur that kind of creative, robust conversation in a safe space.
And that's interesting because an open agenda is like the anthem. I mean, we're trained. You come to a meeting with an agenda and your points, and you stick to the you stick to the list, and you don't veer off. And what you're saying is, no, actually have some time to have some unstructured conversations.
Right, exactly. You might find it very beneficial. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Hopefully that's not too
good.
Controversial a recommendation. I mean, when you've known your partners for a long time, your brain can be on script, and you think you already will know what they're going to say to one of your ideas or how they're going to react to something. So it can be something really to spur that conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of people we talk to use technology. Of course, some of the multi-city firms have partners in different locations, and they use all available technologies for meetings or invest in software that lets them share information easily and seamlessly.
Very good.
And I have one more tip, if you don't mind, that came from a lot of the participants. And some of the great partnerships are doing a lot of off-sites, not just a meeting out of the office with a facilitator and a whiteboard and let's talk about it, but really getting out and participating in new activities. And in some of our research, we found that this can be especially good for creating new pathways in the brain. And we heard this from participants. If you go out and you learn a new activity together, it's not just a bonding experience. It actually is helping you see that person in a new light.
Yeah, very good, very good. That's very interesting. So let's go ahead and do our last polling question here. All right, we'll launch it here. You should see it shortly. What size partnership shows the highest satisfaction? 2, 3 to 5, or 6? So which size? Let's just say that's obviously a quick one. What we know is that 70% of financial advisors are solo practitioners. And what we know is that contemplating a merger could be challenging, but also very important for many of us. So very much appreciate Tanya and Lizette coming and sort of having this discussion with us today. I mean, it's really critical. to address this. And if we are so low and we're looking at contemplating that, what steps do we take? And so to have this laid out is tremendous. We have 63% voted. I'll give you a couple more minutes here. All right. Or not a couple more minutes. Sorry, a couple more seconds. All right. I'm going to close the poll now. One last second there. All right. Here we go. Let me share the results and see what we have. Okay, what size partnership shows the highest satisfaction? 29% said 2 partners, 67% 3 to 5, and only 5% said 6. That's interesting. Lizette, how does the number of partners impact decision making? Well, first off, I guess, what were your research findings on partnership size?
Well, actually, they were different from what the polling result is. And really what we got out of it is that this is something that could really use more research. This is something that we're hoping to be able to look at more. I mean, we collected this information kind of as part of our demographic information. But what we found was more satisfaction in 2 partner. And really the least was 3 to 5 partners. And 3 to 5 so basically, I mean, one of our theories when in talking to 2 partner firms, and some of those had tried to bring on a new partner and failed, or they had been in other sized partnerships. And then we had, people that are currently in a partnership of 3 to 5. And it seemed that in the 2 partner firms, we feel like part of that satisfaction is linked to control and more direct communication. 2 partner firms more likely have really unanimous decision making. So on big decisions, they either both agree or they don't move ahead. And that can be a pretty simple arrangement. I mean, it doesn't mean that they don't have conflict, but it's very direct and it's easier to deal with. And the same with how they communicate. It's very direct communication. When you add 1 person, you add 2 new relationships. And we really saw, cases not only in firms that were still together, but firms that had split up where the 3 partner mix was very difficult to maintain in terms of people feeling that there were coalitions built and it was harder to communicate. And in the 3 to 5 partnership, one of the things that seemed to be a concern is that people go into them from either a 2-person firm formally or being a sole practitioner and really are not prepared for how much control they have to give up. It takes a really long time for partners in that size firm to really adjust to the fact that either they're going to have a distinct role where they have decision making, or 1 person, not them, is going to be the sole decision maker. And it can be really, even if they think they're prepared for it, it can be very difficult adjustment. And also, even though they're expecting greater profitability, and that's why they're going into it, it can take a while for firms to really ramp up and feel that profitability. So the first year or even 2, the investment they're making and the time they're making and the difficulty is seeming not worth it for what they're getting out of the partnership. Not that we don't have successful, 3 to 5 person firms, but just generally. And that's something we really want to, really do some more research into if possible. And then we actually looked at firms of 6 or more. So when they get to that size, we saw satisfaction kind of pick up again, or how people rated it was higher. And again, we kind of theorized that it's because their expectations were that they were going to have to give something up. They were a little more prepared to give up the control, and so it's not, it hasn't led to dissatisfaction on their part. Does that make sense?
It's interesting, when I look at the chart, what I'm thinking of is, career tracks for the next gen coming in. And I look forward to you guys doing more research on this, because I think that firms that are a little larger, that have the obvious career path for the younger advisor coming in, will have a better, the growth rate. And you can see that the growth rate would be the profitability would be higher. And it's just that control piece. I can see where
Right.
that would be.
Yeah, we thought
harder.
it bode it it bode well for the kind of trend to bigger regional firms or firms that have more of a corporate structure.
Yep.
It's harder to keep that communication if you're coming from a small firm, but there are certainly things you can do to do it, and overall satisfaction could be very high.
Right. So what role can consultants play when you, let me just go to the next slide here. So number 7, engage consultants who display objectivity and offer strong process. So what role can consultants play, and what do you mean by objectivity?
Well, there we did talk to people who, had really struggled a lot before bringing in someone to, help facilitate conversations. Tanya alluded to it a few times about the familiarity that people grow to have with their partners and how it can be difficult for them to really hear each other and really, kind of not, much like a married couple, we certainly hear a lot of comparisons to that, to really hear each other and not just think what they're going to say. And this is also true for partners just getting together, sole practitioners who are coming together. If they don't have someone to facilitate that, there is a certain amount of assumptions that they might make about the other party or defensiveness that they might have about the other party that can be difficult to work through without having someone else to help frame it in an objective way. And in negotiation there's something called reactive devaluation, which means if the other people bring it up, you kind of think it must be a bad idea for you. And so we want to bring someone in who can kind of see the best in both both things that are being put forward or the group together.
Right. That makes sense. And I think that there are, how are dissenting voices heard, and in what ways, do you come to a decision during these disagreements? And I feel like having a mediator at that point when the stakes are high, and it could be well past the honeymoon phase. It probably is often well past the honeymoon phase that happens.
Right.
Yeah, it can be, and what we are trying to encourage is, some things that partners can do for themselves as far as, taking the skills that they use when they're dealing with their clients, as far as, listening actively and trying to get to what underlying interests are, to use those within your own partnership. But if there are times when you're stuck, not to keep wasting time on that, or not to get to a point where communication is really broken down, but to call in someone else.
Don't wait until it's too late. Yeah.
Right.
So, Tanya, number 8 there. What can you learn by speaking with others who know your potential partner?
Right. That was a great tip that came out of some of our interviews, and some of the people we spoke to wish that they had really done that. It comes down to confirmation bias. If you like someone and you respect them and you're thinking about going into a partnership with them, you tend to hear the good and not pay as much attention to the bad. And this allows you to collect more data and more points of view and really make it harder to ignore red flags by talking to prior business partners, former clients, or staff. And we have a kind of a story of there was a really good partnership with a great reputation, but it was well known that one of the partnerships had a difficult personality. They broke up. It wasn't too surprising. And another firm came in and tried to scoop up the other advisor to join their firm, and then without really talking to a lot of other people. Well, it turns out that the person that they brought into their firm also may have had a little bit of a difficult personality and was hard for the staff to get along with, and that partnership ended up not lasting. So that is the kind of the genesis of that tip, that you may think that you know a lot about people, but if you could get more information, that probably would be helpful.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. So Lizette, number 9, creatively develop a partnership constitution together. So partnership constitution, so let's back up and have a vocabulary moment. What does that mean?
Well, one of the things that we had developed in working with partners before, and then it was really reinforced with the people we spoke to in our interviews, was that you really want to capture what a lot of the discussions that you have separate from things that end up in the operating agreement. So I think there is some confusion. I have an operating agreement. Why would I need a partnership constitution? But here's two key differences, basically. If you look, the operating agreement is going to be a legally binding document. You definitely need an operating agreement if you're going to be in a partnership, and you have your attorney draft that, and it's not going to change. You're going to come up with some very basic structures about how you're going to run things, how what your titles will be, what your ownership percentage will be, those kind of things. But the partnership constitution, it's not legally binding, and it's more of a living document. So it's something that will change as needed. But what we're trying to do is scoop up all of the things that are agreed to during the merger discussions. So where an operating agreement is going to be this document that guides the formation and operation of the business, the partnership constitution is really more about the process of talking about what you want your business to be, how you're going to work together, discussing what-if scenarios. And what we found, and we had been doing this with partners anyway, and what we found when we talked to people is one of the things that they really regretted was that so many things that they talked about and that they thought they had reached resolution on, but they weren't the type of things that would be in an operating agreement, so they didn't get written down. And then later, when they had disagreements or kind of misremembered what they had discussed, they didn't have a resource to go back to. So what we help people do is draft this partnership constitution. Actually, on the next slide, we give some examples of how, what the partnership agreement might say, we'll need to have unanimous agreement to bring on a new partner, but the Constitution will talk more about if we're going to bring, now there's 3 of us. If we're going to bring on a partner, these are the things we're going to look for. And that, we've seen really can be an inflection point for people where someone finds someone that they think will be a good partner for reasons that weren't things that the other partners had discussed previously about what would make a good partner. So there's that. People also decide about whether they can engage in outside business, but it's really to the extent of we'll allow this or we won't, whereas the partnership constitution really wants to talk about if you're going to go out and, community service is important to us, but that doesn't mean 1 day a week. Like, what's a reasonable amount of time for us to encourage community service or giving back to the profession? Can you use staff time for that? And more best practices than legally binding. And really, there are things that shouldn't be included in an operating agreement. You don't need that level of detail, and I think an attorney would tell you not to include it. So you might say, we should have an annual meeting in the operating agreement, but then talk about this is our best practice. This is what I think we need to do to make sure we have a really strong business, and this is how we want to meet. Does that clarify it a little bit?
It does. It does. That's very good. I think the tendency to think if you want sort of confirmation bias, if you want it all to work out, it's very easy to not address things that will cause issues in the
just
future.
say, yeah, that will be part of our implementation.
We'll take care of that when we get to it.
Yeah, and the devil's in the details, of course.
Right. Okay, so Tanya, what can you learn by speaking with others? Casting a wide net. Here we go. Why should you cast a wide net for prospective partners? Wouldn't it be safer to go with somebody you know?
Right. I think we kind of already alluded to this answer already. We heard from a remarkable number of people who did go into business with someone they knew from a professional organization or a study group because they liked what they had to contribute. They respected their professionalism, even if they've known them for a number of years. And we talked to several people who found that they went to a partnership on that basis, and they were not compatible in business at all. In some cases, there were ethical differences in standards sometimes they just had different expectations. And research supports this, that people immediately sense when someone is like them and considers them to be in group, they have an in-group association, which gives you a sense of security that this is somebody you can trust, even if it's superficial. But we have found that if you're going to go into business with someone, you're going to have to assess them fully, ideally on a formal basis, to find out if they're a good fit for you and a good fit for the partnership. So you might as well look at a bigger pool so you'll have more choices. And then you may end up with someone who has more complementary skills or a larger network. If you have more choices, you can make a better choice.
And that's interesting because I think that the popularity of study groups makes one feel like I am working with, I'm in a study group with someone and we are aligned, and you may be aligned from an investment perspective,
Right.
investment policies, investment style,
Right.
but that doesn't mean that you should that may be very true, but what you're saying, if I hear it, is go back and go through the whole process with them anyway and add more people to it. Just because you don't know someone doesn't mean that it also won't be a good fit, which actually works well for RIA Match.
Yes,
So,
it does. But, right.
Lizette, how can people best implement these practices? Well, what we want to do is just make the cultural part kind of part of the due diligence process. And we know that there are a lot of elements that people already have to look at and do due diligence on, and we've shown a few here, looking at how you fit for your custodian, how you're going to get financing. So, I mean, we know it's a big deal. But what is this really critical factor, and one that we just don't feel like people know how to address in a way that they are used to looking at other things, in a way that's really a due diligence process. So what we're looking at is to basically put these components, the relationship as the foundation, getting to know each other in a more structured way, including assessments, and then having communication and having that communication be really constructive and include decision making and include role playing, and kind of capturing all of that in a partnership constitution that would kind of pull together your full due diligence process by adding these kind of cultural best practices.
And it's great to have that, because we talk about having to get a culture fit, but this is not just saying, yes, you have to be culturally aligned. This is how you assess if you are. So
right.
It's the how that's very helpful.
Yeah, and some of them are really low, what we would call low cost, high value. Doing the reference checks, we really spoke to several people who just said, I can't believe that I should have just talked to more people about this guy or this woman. And I know
you do it when you hire an intern. You do it when you hire.
Yeah, and they just thought they knew them, and so they're really, some of these things are really not very are pretty simple, but they really a lot of people that don't do them have really regretted it, and it's a good way to have that sense of security, and you really need that. There's too many moving pieces. You need to find security where you can.
Right. We're just about done here, but Tanya, I wanted if you would tell us how can we work with the partnership resource?
Sure. So, as hopefully we've demonstrated, we are really committed to helping people get the best out of their partnerships, really from formation. So we can assess people who are planning to go into partnerships. If you're looking at succession planning, we can help with a solution to that. We do facilitated meetings. We can help write your partnership constitution. We do offsites if your partnership is stuck on something or not operating at 100%. We can have a facilitated conversation with you about that. And if you think that maybe your partnership is at a point where you have to decide whether to continue or not, mediation is another service we offer as an alternative to litigation that can help you decide whether a few changes need to be made so you can move forward, or do you need to dissolve in a
constructive manner.
Constructive, exactly. That will help you maintain, to the extent possible, what you've built. And we have a free initial consultation that we will give to anyone. Let us know what you're thinking about, and we can see if our services would be a good fit for that. And we're also offering a discounted mini engagement in your RIA Match store so that anyone listening to this can see what we're offering kind of at a discounted price.
Very good. Well, thank you very much. We are going to have Q&A right now. We are right at the 1 hour mark, so if someone needs to leave, we certainly understand that. We want to be respectful of your time, and we're very grateful that you've joined us. But I would like to, I've gotten the question, are these slides available? They will be available. We're going to have the recording in our webinar archive, and so the slides will be in the recording, and I apologize, my slides were jumping around there a little bit. What about the slides straight, if they wanted just to get the slides by themselves? Is that possible?
Sure. If they want to email us, my email is on the screen right now.
Okay.
I can get you, I'll send you a copy of the slides.
Okay, great, great. And I've got a couple of other people while you were presenting that also asked for the slides, so I will communicate that to them. Are there any questions? Anybody have any questions for Lizette and Tanya? Well, while people are thinking about that, I just want to thank you very much for Lizette and Tanya, for Lizette Smith and Tanya Paz for sharing your valuable insights and results of your study. It's been great. Okay, there is one question. Okay, here we go. So I am a solo founder, and I don't want to partner with anyone. Clarity. But I know I need a succession plan. What do I do? How do I address that? Who wants to jump in on that one?
I think that goes back to really the first best practice, which is, thinking hard about, you obviously know that there is a reason for you to consider bringing on a partner or consider it as part of a succession plan. So I think that kind of goes back to our first point about assessing your motivations, and maybe one of the things I will warn you is that, we did talk to partnerships where people were brought in as successors and really felt that they were not treated or seemed to be thought of as partners. And people, if they have other alternatives, they won't stay in a situation like that. So that kind of limits, that might limit your ability. Actually, Tanya, did you?
Right, but at each point, you need to assess your alternatives. So at the beginning of your practice, you had the awareness to know that you wanted to be a solo and you were happy with that. But now as time goes on and you're looking to maximize the value of your firm, every alternative needs to be carefully vetted for the risk and the reward that comes with it. But maybe bringing on another partner as a way to ease succession might be coming up in the list of alternatives that are more palatable and acceptable to you.
That's a good point. Couple of questions. Another one here is, do you consult both the buyer and the seller regarding succession planning? Say if the seller wants to phase out over a 3 to 8 year period.
Well, really our role is more of a neutral. We would come in and sort of be on the side of resolution and be the negotiator in between the buyer and the seller.
So just for clarity, so I understand, then if I'm a buyer and I bring you in and you mediate, do both the buyer and the seller share the cost of that? I mean, who writes the check?
Right, we get 2 checks.
Yeah, almost, unless there's an exception, usually people share the fee. They agree that they want to use a mediator or an objective facilitator, and then we work with them to, pursue their deal and then charge them equally.
Very good. And then the follow-up question to that is, what is your fee structure for consulting? So can they, with that question that Paul had, should he reach out to you all directly?
Right. I mean, it kind of depends on the service. Overall, we have an hourly fee, but we usually charge, we usually scope out an engagement and can give you a proposal for that engagement. So it depends on kind of the services or the combination of services. But we do have, if we know a little more about it, we could give you a better idea of how much that would be, yeah.
Okay, great. So Paul said he will contact you, so thank you very much,
Great.
Paul. That's
Thank
great,
you.
thanks. Also, Andrea said, great presentation, delighted it was given by women. There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. That's another topic of research for us at some point.
Yes,
too.
yes, that is. So one last question I have for you is, where can we go to download the white paper today?
Oh, it's available on our website, which is on
Okay.
the slide. It's thepartnershipresource.com.
Okay, great. Well, this has been very valuable, just tremendous. Thank you both very much. I want to thank our audience for taking the time to join us today to learn more about why some mergers fail and others succeed. We're grateful that you're part of the RIA Match community, and we wish you a safe summer. All the best. Good afternoon. And this concludes our webinar today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.